this, but I just move very fast.
Okay, so I think Sue, see how you're in there.
Good, 7 o'clock. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. I was just commenting to the last crew that was in here that pleased and excited about the turnout tonight. I have no idea what to expect, so I didn't make enough copies, but there was another one here, a fourth one that I'm going to get copies of in a moment. And I was just saying, I'm wondering for adults, I mean, we've been in the building now since September 8th, and of course the kids are here. Is anybody feeling like this is the first time you've been in a somewhat enclosed space with a lot of people? Everybody feeling okay? Good. It took me a while to get used to that. I have to, when I'm speaking, I have to go with this more flimsy mask, and during the day I'm trying to wear one of those K95s. It's really hard with trying to catch air. Can't do it if I'm speaking publicly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about merit scholarships, but I think the first part I'm going to talk a little bit about just how scholarships work in general. I do speak. I was noticing I was speaking really, really fast, and probably to get all in, I tend to just ramble. So please stop me if you've got a question, and we can go off topic here too. Okay. So the first thing, I think the most important thing is for you, well, your students, to really set priorities first. I have a lot of students who ask me about scholarships, and yet we haven't talked about their applications yet. And I know, the cost of things is on everybody's mind, and they want to make sure they're on top of things. But it's really important that we get our scholarships, our applications done first. Okay, we have some deadlines coming up, and they're not hard deadlines, meaning if you don't get them in, you're not going to have an opportunity. But there's these things called early action that a lot of schools have gone to try to encourage students to apply early, so they can kind of set their set their numbers and they're looking for a certain number of applicants. So everything's been moved up now. So a lot of schools have these early application deadlines of November 1, November 15, and then they'll have an additional deadline of January 1, January 15. The advantage of getting it early is I don't see too much in the way of making a difference in whether students get in or not, but I do see a difference certainly in terms of when you're going to find out whether you got in. Okay, and I do see maybe a difference in the amount of merit aid that you'll get from the school. If you get they tell us by students getting in their applications by the early action deadline that they'll have full access to all their scholarships. There might be a slight advantage too as well in terms of getting in for admissions. Early decision is a whole different animal. Not going to talk about that today, but early action, there's no harm in applying early action if you can get your applications done by then. You should know that in terms of merit aid, which is aid based on something the student has done during high school. Typically, it's performance in the classroom. It could be, musically. It could be athletically. That's merit aid. 90% of it comes directly from the institutions in which students apply to. So people always hear, well, there's that left-handed scholarship and the scholarship for people over 6'5", and there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars left on the table out there, and people just don't apply to them. It's not necessarily true. Most of the scholarships come from the schools that you apply to. There are some scholarships out there that are kind of wacky and crazy, and people do get them, but they're really, it's a needle in the haystack for those ones. Most of the aid comes directly from the institution. And the good news is that most schools, you simply apply, put your application for admission, you're going to automatically be considered for their scholarships. That being said, there are some schools who do have separate scholarship applications for some of their incoming freshman scholarships. And you just have to look on their website. So the U of M, if you apply, you're going to be considered for most of their scholarships, but they do have 92 additional scholarships that you can apply to separately. Most of them are most of them are really niche scholarships. They're certain students doing certain things, or they're already students there. But I know, for example, I have 2 sons who graduated from here last year, and one of them went to the U, and he did get a scholarship that was a separate application, and he was notified about for the Carlson School of Business. And he applied, and he got it. It was partial need, partial merit-based. So that's worth noting. There's also, and I'm just pointing out the U because we get a lot of information from that. There's always a scholarship that comes like February or so, and it's for a fraternal organization, but not a social fraternity. It's a men's only fraternity, but it's not the kind of fraternities we're thinking about. They offer scholarships for students, for young men coming into the U. And you'll see that if students apply, you're going to get hit with lots of emails about different opportunities. So there are some special applications out there indeed, but most of it, you're applying for admission, you're going to be considered for other scholarships. You should note that there's more aid based on need than based on merit. And sometimes some of the terminology that's used gets confusing, and some of that information, some of those need-based versus merit-based, and they use the word scholarship sometimes for both of them, when really they should be using the word grant. But I only know this because my other son he applied for admission to Wisconsin, Madison, and he got in, and then he got a financial aid letter, and he had the Bucky something or other scholarship. Like, scholarship? I don't remember you applying for that. And I had to call and ask about it. And it was really a need-based thing, but they called it a scholarship. Okay, so sometimes as we're throwing the word scholarship around, we have to keep in mind are they talking about need, or are they talking about merit? Other things besides hitting those application deadlines is, and I don't know if you've gone to hear Steve Lindley yet about financial aid. Make sure you fill out the FAFSA. That opens up tomorrow. That's the free application for federal student aid. Opens up tomorrow. There's really no deadline. I mean, the deadline on it is all the way September of next year, but you do want to fill it out as soon as possible. I would say, target by like winter break to get that done after you've done your application for admission. And again, it's free. You don't go to FAFSA.com. And in addition, some schools, some of the privates might ask for something called a CSS profile. And that's a College Board product. And that one you do pay for. So just note if that's not a scam, you actually have to pay for that one. Not all schools, not many. A lot of the privates do that. They ask for the CSS profiles and asking more information about assets and such. Yes?
Just a quick question I meant to ask in the last session. Are they timed out, or can you work on it slowly? Like, can you fill in?
It does. I don't think the FAFSA times out.
So you can start it.
You can, correct. You can, yep. So your students, and do I need to repeat the question? The question was whether FAFSA times out. The answer is no. You can do it in multiple sessions, and your student starts creating the account first, and then the parent comes in on the back end. Will have to create your own FSA PIN, it's called, and that's the same number you'll keep that somewhere. It's the same number you're going to use for all 4 years. So it's important to before we talk about private scholarships, I think we get the FAFSA done first. And by the way, in the educational world, when they talk about financial aid, they're including student loans. That's a form of financial aid because the interest rates are lower. It's just a sad fact, but it's financial aid, as is work study. That's also considered financial aid. Okay, merit-based scholarships. So merit, again, based on something the student has done, accomplished, excelled at. Some of the most competitive schools, academically competitive, don't offer merit aid. They don't need to because some people are willing to go in there, just going to pay full price. Even if they're not getting a need-based aid. So Carleton, for example, they don't offer merit aid. It's only need-based aid. And they a school that will meet 100% of a student's need. What students' need is determined by partially by the FAFSA, but also by the institution. So check their websites for that. You're also going to want to check, as students are filling out these smaller applications for smaller scholarships. This, again, happens a little later in the year. We want those applications done first. It's worthy to note, though, as you're doing this, to check the schools that you're really targeting that you want to go to. Check to see if they do something called stacking the scholarship, which is, yes, that you want them to stack, meaning they will just keep, if you get private scholarships later, they'll just keep adding on and not subtracting anything. Because some schools will, especially, they're not going to let you get all these scholarships and actually come out making money, and they will take away some of your aid. But even if you're not going above and beyond the cost of attendance, some schools might reduce your need-based aid if you get significant scholarships. That would be unstacking. So it's worthwhile understanding that. You don't want to be disappointed. You worked hard, you got the scholarship, and they just took away, $3,000 in grant money from the school because, So a good thing to do to check that out. Some schools, not many, but some schools are very transparent about how they give merit aid. Many schools are not so transparent because they don't really want you to know, because maybe they're trying to get students in who aren't getting, it's like a Division III school, for example, and there's an athlete they want, they don't give athletic scholarships, so they're not always fully upfront about how they divvy out merit aid. Some schools are, so for example, like Michigan State, they may have other aid programs, but this one is based solely on ACT and GPA. You'll find this, like, I think locally at least, and I don't know all of them, but like St. Scholastica, I said that right this time. They have something like this as well on their website, where you can just see it's the intersection of ACT and GPA will determine how much merit scholarship the student will get. So in this example, not that we have a ton of students applying to Michigan State, so a student sitting at a 26 on the ACT and has a 3.6, that's $7,000. Now, seniors probably know this at this point. It's really hard to make your GPA move once you're a senior. It's going to move maybe a tenth of a point or a quarter at best, particularly if you're up here with high GPA. Hard to make it move. So as much as many students, and we could talk about ACT and who's using it and how they're using it, but I'm not going to do that here. But in this situation, if the student doesn't mind taking the ACT again, they're sitting right here, well, one more point on the ACT is going to get you an extra $3,000. So something to think about, and you have to look at the schools you're applying to, and if they present something like this, and it is a strictly ACT, GPA, they're not looking at anything else, you might consider taking it, and you can even take the ACT again, maybe not necessarily for admissions, but let's say you get in and say, oh, well, guess what? Now that when I first applied and I submitted my score, I had a 26. Well, I took it again in December or January. Now I have a 27. And I've seen schools do this. They will bump up the aid. Again, this isn't widespread, but you will see this with some schools.
This is when they're coming into that freshman year. Does this translate out into all 4 years, or is it reevaluated?
If it's renewable,
Yeah.
it can be. So
Repeat the question, sorry. Repeat the question for the live
Sorry?
streamers.
Oh,
Repeat
yeah.
the question for live
So the question, repeating the question, it's whether or not these scholarships like this one would be renewable or not. And they're all different. So they'll state it on their website whether this would be a renewable scholarship or a freshman only scholarship.
So may I ask a follow-up question? So
Yeah.
if you're, say it's your financial reach school, and you were coming into your freshman year and you're looking at the package of what you have to pay, but you haven't, like, many of them are not renewable, so you need to kind of take a gamble on those following years. Is that what?
That is true. So the question is whether or not if you get a bunch of aid your freshman year and they're not necessarily renewable, then how do we look at continuing on for sophomore, junior, senior year, and hopefully not beyond that. Yeah, it's a consideration, and you can always try to appeal to the office. Hey, we came here, you gave us this much money, now we're sitting here sophomore year and we can't afford this. It's a good question to have for the financial aid officer. So I just speaking for myself, my own son, my other son is at the U of M, and he got a scholarship. He got like $10,000 in merit / need-based aid, but it's freshman only. And I've already told him, you're gonna have to think about that. You're gonna have to work this summer and take that, that on-campus job too, because there's a gap there that we're gonna have, I know, for the next year. So our financial situation hasn't changed much. So good question. Okay, I did so on a couple of these handouts. So this one just shows schools who have the highest percentage of students just receiving merit-based scholarships. There's not a dollar figure there, but it's a percent of students who receive aid. And I just, again, this is stuff I didn't do my own research. It's from U.S. News and World Report, and there's another piece on here from Princeton Review. So I highlighted some schools here in yellow that were, I highlighted them because they're students of ours last year who went to these schools. And not that I sat and interviewed all of them, but I'm wondering if many of them ended up choosing to go to these schools because they got some nice aid packages. So Denver, we have a lot of people apply to University of Denver, University of Portland, Denison, which we haven't had students go there. I think we had 2 go there last year. Lewis and Clark, Marquette, University of Vermont, Loyola's a regular, Syracuse, and Grinnell. We all have students from class of 2021 who are there now, and maybe because they gave them good aid. One note that I didn't get a chance to edit on here, this should say highest average need / merit-based aid awards, again, because that word scholarship has gotten a little mushy, and I read it again, and so I changed it on the slide, but not on the sheet. So these are public universities who do offer, are generous when students have gotten in terms of need and merit aid, and then some of the private schools, and Vassar is always known as a school that offers, give students good aid package. Locally, I would say Gustavus is one. If you're looking for, I don't want to highlight only Gustavus, but I know they're pretty generous, as is St. Olaf. Regionally here are schools locally, the cost of attendance, average merit-based aid, and average need-based aid. Families are not going to pay, most families are not paying particular privates the full tab on some of these private schools. So just know almost all students who decide to go to the University of St. Thomas, for example, are not paying $60,000 out of their pocket. They're going to usually get something. And these schools are very wise about knowing what they need to offer to get the kids to come. They have they compete for students. For example, at St. Thomas, they're going to compete with the U. So they have these algorithms that figure out exactly how much they have to offer to make them work, to make them attractive. And they'll usually try to offer a good student, like enough aid to bring their cost in line with the U of M. They know that they believe they're competing for that student. So they do that. And if those kids were looking for maybe a different kind of campus, they're like, boy, I just can't afford, the U is too big for me. I'd really like to be at Mac, or I'd like to be at St. Olaf, and you're a good student, they're going to do it to make that attractive to you. They're going to give you, if you're, a solid student. All right. So the non-institutional scholarships, the scholarships then that students have to apply for separately. Most of these don't open up till December through February. That's why I said I want students to focus on your applications now. Get that back, do that FAFSA. This will come a little bit later. Look at some of the scholarships carefully, and you'll see right away the criteria is usually very explicit as to what they're looking for. You can tell right away if this is a need-based scholarship or a need and merit-based or merit-based only. They're pretty clear about that. Some of them will ask for essay and have the teacher recommendation. I did get more copies of this one. You can pick this up on the way out. So this is, I'll explain these in just a second. If it requires a teacher recommendation, know that for students who need teacher recommendations for admissions, the teacher can modify that to hand that to you and modify it for a scholarship. It's very easy to do. I do it all the time. So you don't need not go to another teacher and get a different recommendation if you're applying for a scholarship down the road if you've already got one. A lot of these private scholarships, they're not, many of them aren't going to be difference makers. They're $1,000 to $5,000 maybe. There are some bigger ones, and there's some that are a little bit smaller, but they can pay for books and such and things like that. Always check to see if they're renewable or they're not renewable. So we have several scholarships that we give away here that are renewable, and some of them are just one-time only. Is there a question?
Yeah, is there a central place for these non-institutional scholarships?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are thousands out there, more than thousands. And again, there's crazy ones that students can apply for. We'll come into students, and this list is going to change a little bit, and we say, hey, yep, you can go do all that research you want. I always tell parents to check with their employers, especially if they're with a large employer. They might offer scholarships through their work for their employee students. But this is I come in with a condensed list. Say these scholarships here, our students have historically gotten these. Last year, maybe the year before, maybe it was 5 years ago. These are ones that we really think you should look at and see if you would qualify for them, because these ones we know our students have access to. A couple I'm just going to point out now, because the ones with an asterisk, they always open up early before the end of the year. So young women out there, AABA, American Association of University Women Scholarship, that's like $4,000 a year for renewable for 4 years. So I think there's a financial need component to that one. That would be a good one to look at early here, as would be the Wildland Educational Partners. They've been working with Minneapolis schools for many, many years. We always have 3 to 8 winners. There is an income element to that one, and you have to be going to school in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, or HCBU, HBCU school. And it's adjusted gross income for a family of 5 and under of 75.755 or less. And as you have a bigger family, the limits are a little bit higher. Have to have at least a 3.0, but that's also like a $16,000 scholarship. So we will come to the class and talk about that. Finally, there's something called the Washburn Scholarships, and that is also on that page. And the Washburn Scholarships are comprised of scholarships from, and many of these donors have been in our community for many, many years, and they love giving us scholarship money. They just don't want to do the legwork of creating an application, reading the application, and making a decision. And so, where'd they go? Yeah, so it's these ones on this page. So they leave it up to us to do, and so we have a scholarship committee. It's kind of hard. There's usually maybe 25-ish scholarships, and ranging from like $500, and one is like $4,000 a year renewable. We have a lot of great students, and there's we get lots of discussion about grades and grade inflation and such. In any case, it makes it very hard for us if we're just looking at grades. And we have the average GPA of this class is 3.22. We've got 120 kids above a 3.81. And we don't have 120 scholarships to give away. So we kind of have to look beyond just grades. So we're looking at involvement at Washburn and loosely defined character. What I mean by that typically is students, once we get to seniors, once we get to February, March, and April, it gets to be pretty tough for students and their families. Even the best students start sliding a little bit. So the ones who are staying strong for that time usually will get a nod over somebody who is kind of fallen back and has gotten a real case of senioritis. So that would be good to remind them that we are very mindful of using all these scholarships, since we don't have 150 of them, to try to look at what everybody else has gotten. And we have an event at the end of the year, and to try to get as many kids there as we can, even if it's a small scholarship, just to celebrate achievements. So that's how we do it. We really look broadly at everybody. We're not just saying, well, the top 10 GPAs in the class, there you go. We try to spread the wealth a little bit. Yeah. Question?
I'm just wondering how character is determined for students that are full-time PSEO.
So how they get this information?
Well, how is character determined for students that are full-time?
Yeah, and that's tough. If
Can
they're
you repeat the question for?
the question was, for students who are doing PSEO, how do we look at them differently if they're not here in the school? It is a little bit harder because we do go back to teachers and ask them for input on this. But if they were here last year, if they're involved in any extracurricular, so kids who are still PSEO come back and they're involved in either theater or the arts or athletics, that's important. And that's important to us too. So we try not to leave them out, but it is tough when kids are not here, especially in the last the last year and a half. I barely know the students this year, so yeah. Okay, I should let you go to the next presentation. If you do have other questions, you can feel free to approach me up here. Yeah.